Good evening. On behalf of the Hyderabad Literary Festival, my colleagues Amita Desai, T. Vijay Kumar, and I, Kinnara Murthy, we warmly welcome you to this monthly online session, which we have been having for the past 3 years and more. In addition to our Grand Gala Festival, annual festival, which is held every January around the Republic Day, the 14th edition of the Hyderabad Literary Festival will be from 26th, 27th, and 28th January 2024. Please do visit us in person at that time. Until then, please do watch all our online sessions. And on behalf of the Hyderabad Literary Festival, my colleague Amita Desai, and enjoy the physical form of the festival. Today, we bring you a book on one of our India's most loved directors, Shyam Benegal. I don't think any introduction is needed, but of course, I have to introduce to you a little bit about the book itself. Refocus, the films of Shyam Benegal, widely regarded as one of the most influential filmmakers of India. Shyam Benegal pioneered avant-garde Hindi cinema, yet his voluminous body of work remains relatively understudied in contemporary film scholarship. To help fill this critical gap, Refocus undertakes a closer look at his filmic output spanning over 40 years. It explores Benegal's use of cinema as a potent medium to narrate the story of a nation in continuous transition. It also analyzes how Benegal blended elements of commercial films and parallel cinema and established new cinematic paradigms. This book has two authors, Sneha Kar Chaudhary and Ramit Samaddar. Ramit Samaddar is unfortunately not able to join as he's not well. Sneha Kar Chaudhary is Associate Professor of English, West Bengal State University. Her publications include co-edited volumes, Tagore's Ideas of the New Woman, The Making and Unmaking of Female Subjectivity, Sage 3 Samya 2017, Refocus, the films of Shyam Benegal, Edinburgh University Press 2023, and several book chapters and research articles. She is the founding Deputy Director of the Center for Studies in Gender, Culture and Media, CSGCM, in the Department of English, West Bengal State University. She is a member of the Feminist and Women's Studies Association UK, Center for Adaptation Studies UK, and the American Comparative Literature Association. Ramit Samaddar is Assistant Professor of English at Jadavpur University, Kolkata. In 2014, he was awarded a Charles Wallace India Trust grant for his doctoral work on Anthony Trollope. His areas of research interest are Romanticism, Victorian studies, Hindi literature, and Bollywood cinema. Talking to Sneha would be Chandana Chakravarti, a friend of HLF, who is a writer, actor, rationalist, and social activist. She has published 4 co-authored books, The Saga of Indian Science Since Independence in a Nutshell, Universities Press 2003, Angels, Devil and Science, NBT 2007, Agenda for the Nation, Mappin 2014, and 2 Phases of Beauty, Science and Art, Mappin 2014, and over 200 articles in national and international publications. She was chairperson of the Hyderabad chapter of FICCI Flow 2010 and 11, and was with the National Knowledge Commission 2005-2008 and CSIR CCMB. She is an elected fellow of the World Academy of Art and Science and is a member of its Board of Trustees. She has acted in Telugu feature films, including super hits like Anand and Vikramarkudu, television serials, and anchored and moderated many live programs on national television. Over to you, Chandana, for carrying out the conversation with Sneha on this very interesting persona called Shyam Benegal.
Thank you, Kinnara. Thank you for this very kind and thoughtful introduction. So, Sneha, we will go directly straight away to discussing your book, Refocus, the films of Shyam Benegal, without any further ado. Like Kinnara said, Shyam Benegal, the finest living Indian filmmaker, does not need any introduction. So we go straight to your book. So Sneha, your book, I repeat its title again, Refocus, the films of Shyam Benegal, that both you and Romit Shomadar have edited, and of course you both have also contributed your own chapters to it, has 14 essays exploring how Benegal's films articulate his concerns about caste, class, gender, religion, and other social, economic, and political problems characterizing the Indian subcontinent. The book also interestingly has a full-length interview with Shyam Benegal, which brings out his perspectives on the art of filmmaking and his analysis of his own films. Now, there are several books published on Shyam Benegal and his films. Why did you think of putting together this book? What is it that inspired you?
Thank you. I would first like to begin by thanking the organizers of the Hyderabad Literary Festival and to Orient Black Swan, the publisher of the softback Indian edition of the original Edinburgh University book, and of course, Kinera Murthy for introducing me and Chandana Chakraborty for this conversation. When I was looking at the literature review of Benegal's books, I only saw that there are 5 books which have been internationally published till date on Benegal. And if you look at the volume of works that he has done till date, not only the films, but the kind of documentaries that he has done and so on, 5 books does not, as such, as when we were thinking of submitting a proposal to the International Directors Series, do justice to his excellent and extremely expansive and prolific set of films. And especially one of the things that was lacking was an edited volume with so many voices coming together, because one of the advantages of having an edited volume is to have many people coming together on the same topic or the same director, and that was completely missing because Shongita Datta or even Anuradha Nidham, who has this interview with Benegal in our book, they have written their own books, and so did Vivek Sachdeva and Samit Chopra. All of those are monographs, but and there is William Van Dyer's interviews on Benegal's books or works, which were published in 2006. So there was a huge lacuna, which we thought was in terms of the lack of this kind of polyphonic kind of array of discussions and issues which needed to be discussed separately in separate chapters by various people who were film enthusiasts in their own way, though not always we got people from film studies background writing for us, because we had professors of sociology or English studies who also contributed to this volume. And we also thought that there have been only 2 of these books on Benegal in Hindi, which did not reach an international audience. And therefore, a lot of work can be still done on the films of Shyam Benegal. And we had conceived of this work in 2017. I must say it took a lot of time, and that is also being because of the ensuing pandemic that we had in between, and work was stalled because a lot of us were having corona, and my co-editor was very young, and he had to go through, his father died, and there were a lot of problems in his family. So taking all these personal problems, I think this series, this book took a longer time than usual to get published. But I thought that at least we have done a work which would perhaps pave way for more these kind of edited volumes on Benegal, which are still necessary and possible.
Shyam Benegal's filmography spans several decades, and of course it covers a wide range of topics. How did you approach organizing and analyzing his films in your book?
this was a very pertinent issue when we started working on it, and our series editors had pointed out that we cannot discuss anything but his films. So we had no scope of writing on his documentaries or any other kind of works that he had done in his whole life. He also did so many advertising films. So we had to concentrate only on the films. And the difficulty was that we could have gone for only a kind of a chronological analysis. And then we thought that maybe no, we would concentrate on the thematic, and we went for a sort of clustering. Because if you look at Cham Benegal's career, you will find that he starts with these very path-breaking and startling set of films, parallel films or avant-garde films on the villages in India, especially with Ankur, where he was majorly recognized by critics and he got the national award. And then he went to make Nishant and Manthan. And these village films, which were very significant. And then later when he comes back to them with Well Done Abba and Welcome to Sajjanpur, which was as late as 2008 and 9, but still he has this cluster of village films. And then of course, in all these films and in any of the other films that he made, majorly if we think of, say, for example, the issue of gender, caste, class, these were emerging as very important. So we also wanted to look at the dimensions in which he had presented women in most of these films, like we think of Bhumika or Mandi, or even films like Suraj Ka Satwa Ghora. And then, of course, there was this focus on the kind of adaptations that he made. Like if you think of Junoon, which is an adaptation of A Flight of Pigeons by Ruskin Bond, or even Kalyug is regarded as an adaptation of the Mahabharata. And of course, even Mandi is one of the adaptation of a short story by Ghulam Abbas called Anandi. And then, of course, we had films like Suraj Ka Satwa Ghora, which is a novella by Dharamveer Bharati. So we also had these adaptations. And the third cluster was, of course, very important, and that was to have the films which were biographical in nature. And that would mean that, of course, we could not talk about the documentary that he has on Satyajit Roy, but there are cross references to that in these chapters. So we had a chapter on the making of the Mahatma, and then Bose the Forgotten Hero. And even if we look at Bhumika or Zubeda, they are also in a way kind of biographical films, or if we say precursors of the biopic as we think of. So we thought that more or less we tried to cover nearly all the films that were significant. And even there are some lesser known films like Arohan, which is again about the village reality in rural Bengal during the time when there was this problem over the end of zamindari and exploitation of labor. And that film also we got two of the contributors coming up with it. And so we tried to discuss as many as possible around these themes and these thematic link-ups that we could establish. And one of the preconditions, of course, was that we should have an interview by Benegal, which he very enthusiastically agreed to give, and Anuradha Nidam had set a set of questions which were really very comprehensive. So one of the assets of this book is to have this interview.
Yes, that indeed is one of the most revealing chapters in a way, because you get to know the person better. And we're so proud that he belonged to Hyderabad. He grew up here. Since you talk about clusters, that's how you've organized this book. Let's take Benegal's rural trilogy, Ankur, Nishant, Manthan. All of them made between 1974 and 1977. These films are iconic for their very realistic portrayal of rural life. and a whole range of societal issues. And they're also celebrated for their social commentary, not to mention, of course, strong performances and the way they contributed to the growth of parallel cinema in India. Now, your book's first two chapters deal with these films. Can you share with us some insights from these two chapters?
Yes, thank you for this question. Yes, we had more or less arranged the book chronologically, though there are these thematic subdivisions which are not very apparent. So the first chapter is obviously on Ankur, which has been written by Sharani Ghoshal from NEET Goa. And there she says that these are these narratives of protest that emerged in Benegal's filmography, because he was invested upon the Telangana movement. And so is Nishant. And therefore, both the films are in a way continuous, in the sense that they are kind of critical of the kind of feudalistic oppression and inequality and the sheer amount of gender oppression and caste oppression which characterized Telangana of his times when he was quite young. And of course, in his interview also, he mentions the same thing. And what we find is that in the first chapter, Professor Ghoshal points out that these are these narratives of protest. And if we look at Lakshmi's character and the way the film ends, that she emerges as somebody who is a victim of male lust of the higher caste men of Surya, and then finally she's able to assert herself in a way that almost is a symbolic overthrow of feudal sexism. And the same kind of thing, if we look at the next chapter on Nishant, which I think Professor Nikhilaj from FLU Hyderabad, she has done it in a brilliant manner, that it is divided into two kind of topics. She discusses the form, the use of language in that film, and then she goes on to discuss the secular and the religious orders which were at odds in that film, where she claims that there was this priest who was representing a kind of religious modernity. And also there was the schoolmaster played by Greenish Karnad, who was representing a secular modernity. And what is the village community in Nishant trying to choose? Is there a kind of a way out from feudalism via the schoolmaster or via the priest? The film continues this kind of a dichotomy and debate, and we definitely don't see that it is resolved in the end, because of course the film is quite open-ended. But of course there is this kind of offering of alternative possibilities, that instead of the feudal leader or the lord, there can be the schoolmaster who is a harbinger of education, or there can be the priest who is a harbinger of good religious values, who can lead the people out of the dangers of feudalistic inequality and oppression. So even in Manthan, which has been written by one of my senior colleagues from my university, from the Department of Sociology, she did very importantly point out that in that film, Benegal had used the Ambedkarian vision of the caste and gender axis instead of the Nehruvian or the Gandhian. And that's because she tries to show that this churning out of change that's the title that she uses, that this change that happens in the village because of the coming of Dr. Rao, who's actually, again by Girish Karnad, he is actually a real life persona of Dr. Varghese Kurian, who was a milkman of India. And we see that maybe Dr. Rao was not truly able to mobilize these village people to go for a cooperative of milk and have their own resources. But when he leaves, when he's giving these false charges of rape, and he's disgusted with the situation, we see that people like Bindu which is who is played by Smita Patil, and Muti, who was incidentally quite antagonistic, played by Nasruddin Shah. They mobilize themselves and rise up against the Sarpanch and Mishra, who was the kind of a Mahajan who was exploiting them. And they sort of try to resist the kind of oppression based on money, gender, caste, or any of these facilities which were available to the people. So more or less, these films were trying to sort of create an awareness among the urban audience that these are the issues which should shape an India which was still coming up, and it was at the cusp of tradition and modernity.
Shyam Benegal has also made biographical films, which have also been great successes. Bhumika in 1977 on the life of Hansa Badekar, Sardari Begum in 1996, Making of the Mahatma in 1996, Zubeda in 2001, and more recently Forgotten Bose, that's 2004 or 2005. Mama was not exactly biographical, but very relatable. Would you like to throw some light on these films as well?
Actually, when I started this project, I was myself working on biopic adaptation studies, and in a conference which I've attended in De Montfort University or in Leicester in 2015, I saw that there was a very vibrant group of Western researchers who were looking at Western biopics or Hollywood biopics in a very massive way, and a lot of research was being conducted. So when I came back to India, I thought maybe there's a lot of work in the cinema front, in the practical front on biopics, but not so much research has yet been done on these biopics. So I thought that maybe if we look at how the biopic emerged in the Indian industry, especially if you look at the Hindi film industry, and now biopics are so popular, we can again see Shyam Benegal as one of the pioneering figures, because he did these kind of biographical films at a point where we did not have many of such films in the popular domain. Say there was maybe this Razia Sultana or Mirabai, which were done by played by Hema Malini, but these were not so significant as a kind of biographies. They were more of myths, and they were more about how the woman was struggling, and the form was still yet to come up. But if you look at the Bhumika, and then it's not just an adaptation of a biography, but also a kind of an film which tries to experiment with the form of the biopic. And then, of course, the Making of Mahatma, which is again Fatima Meer's adaptation of that book. So, and then, of course, both The Forgotten Hero and Zubeda. Zubeda, incidentally, had the script by Khalid Muhammad, who is the actual son of Zubeda. So in Zubeda also we see that it's a story, untold story of a woman who had no space in the Rajasthani royal household, being a Muslim woman and being previously married. And then also there is Sardari Begum, where this woman is a controversial character because she belonged to a class of women who were professional singers, and they were not seen as respectable. So if we look at the kind of biographical films that Benegal had tried to portray or recreate on the big screen, we see a lot of experiment with the emerging form of the biography or the biopic. And if we look at the layout of any of these films, that they are not similar but very distinct, taken the importance of the protagonist and the position of the protagonist in terms of the use of the gender angle or the nationalist angle that is there in any of these films. And therefore, I thought that it is important to include broader discussions of the form of the biographical film that he has very successfully experimented with. And later we have films like Bandit Queen by Shekhar Kapoor or Godmother by Vinay Shukla, which have been predicated on Benegal's use of this form.
Sneha, that actually reminds me, and I'd like to share this little anecdote with you. We were very lucky in Hyderabad, a group of us. We got to premiere at least 4 of Shyam Benegal's films in Hyderabad, and he had come down to be with us, with the audiences. And I very clearly recall, when Making of the Mahatma was shown, this is 1996. I think we showed it early 97, sometime in January. And so Shyam Benegal had flown to Hyderabad. This was shown in one of the bigger halls in Hyderabad. The capacity was something like 1,400. And we just put in an ad in the newspapers. It was a free showing of the film. Now, some of us were very worried that, will we have a full hall after all a biopic, Making of the Mahatma? How many people would come to see for Gandhi, etc. So, how surprised we were. A hall that could take 1,400 people took in 1,600 that day. There was not an inch of space left in the auditorium. Every space on the, in the aisles, everything was taken. Not just that, we were later told as many people that were in the hall had to actually leave because they couldn't even come anywhere close to the theater. Not just that, we had requested Shyam Benegal to give us a talk before his screening his film. He spoke for 40 minutes. There was pin drop silence in the auditorium. And then when Shyam Benegal himself wanted to come in and sit with the audience to watch his film, there was no space. He couldn't enter it. So he had one of the finest premieres here. Absolutely amazing film.
Yes, so many people appreciating parallel cinema. And that too, sometimes biopics are regarded as a little boring also, because they are so gray, they deal with political issues. So that way, the Making of the Mahatma is a very somber and a very serious film. And to have such a vibrant
audience. Worried about, having the auditorium full. But as about 1,400 people went back, there was a traffic jam here in front of that, theater. Well, coming to another cluster of films now, we talked about his rural trilogy. Now, he returns to rural films sometime in the late 2008 or so, right? With Welcome to Sajjanpur and Well Done Abba, 2008, 2009. Such a prolific filmmaker every year. And these two, of course, were satires. And I believe the underlying theme in these films is that of transformation of rural India, which is on the cusp of globalization at that point. So what do you think about these two films? What have your contributing authors written about these two satires?
Yes, we have a very significant chapter in this book on both these films, Welcome to Sajjanpur and Well Done Abba, which is by Professor Aisha Iqbal Vishwamohan from IIT Madras. And she has written this with her research fellow Shayanti Chatterjee. And this chapter contains a discussion of both the films as being quite different and being consciously different from the earlier village films that were done by Benegal. Because if we look at Ankur, Nishant, Manthan, and maybe Arohan or Kandura, all of these films are located in a particular historical, political, or cultural context, which by the time he was doing films like Welcome to Sajjanpur or Well Done Abba, it has changed radically. The village is no more a hub of feudalistic vices or being monopolized by this kind of class hierarchy, but things have changed. Things have perhaps become much better because he was looking at a village which is at the is a new millennium almost. It's in 2008 and 9, so the shooting was somewhere in 2005 or 6. So after 2000, which is a new millennium, and therefore the plots in both these films, we find that there is still a lot of contradiction, a lot of struggle, a lot of corruption, as a part the village life is being represented. But at the same time, there has been many positive improvements and changes and ideological changes in the characters. Say, for example, if I think of Welcome to Sajjanpur, which is a kind of a dark comedy, and it is a bit aspirational in the sense that the character Mahadev, played by Shreyas Talpare, who wants to actually become a writer in the true sense of the term, but the only opportunity that he gets in the film is to write letters beneath a banyan tree in the village. And these are the letters which are sent by the villagers to their relatives and friends who live and work in the city. And how that fabricates a complex web of relationships, where we see that Mahadev's wife Vindhya, who is a modern woman and who rides the moped, and who is very intelligent and doesn't fear that she's a Mangalik, and she has this fancy way of putting herself forward. So she's very different from, if we think of Lakshmi or Shushila or Bindu, we have these array of characters who are now modernized, who have access to city life, and who are much more emancipated. But then it doesn't mean that all their problems and all their contradictions are over, and that they get their fair share of what they deserve, even in the villages. And so Mahadev tries to interfere upon this Kamla's relation with Bansi, and that's a kind of a serio-comic thing, because Mahadev has an attraction for Kamla, and what we see is that Kamla is much more attached to Bansi, and their relationship ultimately doesn't break, even if Mahadev, by writing the letters, tries to create some misunderstanding between the husband and the wife. And it also tries to show that maybe in the end, Mahadev realizes that he can realize his dream of becoming a writer, and writes a novel. The film fabricates a version of Sajjanpur, which is perhaps his construct. And that is one of the most interesting things, that the reality, whether it is Mahadev who fabricates it by writing these letters, and or whether it is a real village out there. So the film leaves us with that. But Well Done Abba, I think, is much more again invested upon the construction of a well, and it is a kind of an adaptation, in that sense that it was Jilani, Banu, and Sanjeev who had written these narratives about the construction of a well and the construction of a bridge, and Jayant Kripalini had converted these two narratives into the script of Well Done Abba. And we find that Arman Ali, played by Maman Irani, he is trying to construct a well for the village, for the improvement of the village, to bring more water resources and to facilitate more modernization and urbanization. But he faces with a lot of corruption from the government officials. He has to bribe them, and in turn, he is later convicted because he bribes the government officials. So it again is a more darker film, which unlike Sajjanpur, which is a kind of a utopian film with more elements of humor and more elements of sentiment. In Well Done Abba, we see that there is this configuring of these major nexus between how the government operates with its resources in the village areas, and how the schemes for development are not properly executed, and where there's a gap between development and modernization in the village life. So Well Done Abba is again going back to the serious mode of the earlier films, but not so serious in that sense that, again, there are touches of humor and comedy in the entire film, and in a very I would say, very effortless and very off the track manner. Benegal again creates a new idiom for talking about villages in his films. And I think when later we have Vishal Bhardwaj making his Matru Ki Bijli Ka Mandola, or even Ashutosh Gowarikkar's Lagan would be more historical, but Swadesh, where we find that this is the Benegal of Welcome to Sajjanpur and Well Done Abba, which comes back to their imagination in their films. So that is again a new way of looking at village realities.
In Shyam Benegal's films, we get to hear a lot of Dakkani, the
Yes.
Very special Hyderabad lingo. And that was true of Ankur, it was true of Welda Nappa, true of Susman.
Yes.
And another nice thing is that Shyam Benegal made a lot of films in Hyderabad. For example, Welda Abba, if I remember right, he was one of the first ones to use Ramoji Film City, which was just built and completed. And because a group of us happened to meet him here, his old friends, etc. And he was telling us the advantages of having something like Ramoji Film City, where you come with your crew, everyone's inside, you finish everything, and you go with a canned, product. So Welda Nabba was made here. Ankur actually was shot very close to where, in fact, a few kilometers from where Shyam Benegal was born, Trimalgiri. And this is a place called Alwal. And I remember I was in school then when it was being shot. And, for us at that point, to see a film being shot close to your house is fantastic. Susman, for example, on Weavers, he'd done in Kolgudam, which is a village that Telangana village that produces, it's a weaving village. All your ikat weaves come from there, apart from Pochampalli. So it's great to see him put Hyderabad on map of films, Indian films. Now, coming to more not really mundane matters, but important in several ways. Now, you've put together a book with 13 chapters and 16 contributing authors on someone who's India's finest living filmmaker. This surely was an onerous task. May I ask you, what was your journey through this process?
It has been an incredible journey in that sense that I would first like to thank the series editors, in particular of Edinburgh University Press, especially Robert Singer, is a faculty with New York State University. He was so encouraging and so prompt, and every time we were like in any kind of trouble or we had doubts or anything, he would encourage us like anything, and he would come up with all his suggestions. And since I had worked with Sage before this for an edited volume on Tagore, I had some amount of experience, but Romit was again very young and he was very skeptical, and he was quite a perfectionist. He was not willing to let go the manuscript with the minutest of mistakes being corrected, and that I think as a youngster he did a good thing. And I was like time is running away, and even Shyam Benegal wanted to read this book of ours, so I was a little apprehensive that why are we like taking so much time. But and I did have some tiff with him over this, but still when I look back at the finished product, I think that those were the trial and error moments which mattered. And all the contributors except Shomok Mukherjee and Romit and I myself, all were very senior, and they were really very patient with us, and they tolerated all our whims and all our delays with all kind of support that they could give. And this is very important, that when we put together an edited volume with so many issues which were being discussed, and especially the interview which was conducted, and all the senior faculty who took up these chapters, and they took the responsibility of bringing out the best that they could, and we thought our team of even our peer reviewers, Professor Aparna Sharma from UCLA campus, and other people who, Meenakshi Bharat from the University of Delhi, and we had many of these people helping us at points, giving us suggestions which mattered a lot. So I think this has been a collective effort, because an edited volume cannot just rest on the shoulders of the editor or the editors. And since we were relatively young, I think, so I thought that it was the cooperation from the senior people, whether within Edinburgh or the writers, which mattered most. And of course, it was very easy for us because the press, the university press, was so structured, and they had all the departments and all the people helping us in all kinds of things that were needed. And finally, we had our proofreader, whom I must mention is one former student of Jadavpur University, is a young person. She also helped us a lot with the proofreading, Aldish Idrus, and that final stage was very important. And I think what we have before us is something that I can feel proud about for the next few years at least. Still another edited volume comes out on Benegal. And I would expect that somebody does work on his documentaries. I'm looking forward to that kind of a book, which would have absolutely great discussion of all his documentaries.
Now, were there any surprising or lesser known aspects of Benegal's films while researching for the book that you could have found? Can you share some examples?
Like, I would say that since the chapters have been written by separate people, had we all the contributors, they would be able to give a better answer to this, because they had their own individual experiences. And I personally, I don't know of any, but I discovered one thing which I don't know, it's not so lesser known, but still I thought it was rather to be pointed out, that I was doing this talk on Zubeda one day with the Talking Films Online. It's an online forum hosted by Professor Nikhilaich on Facebook. And I discovered that many of these major actors, mainstream actors, especially Shah Rukh Khan, to mention, had refused the role of the Raja in Zubeda, and the role played by Manoj Bajpayee, which I thought was, again, if you look at a film like Shakti that Karishma Kapoor did, where she was at a very pivotal role, and there we have a cameo by Shah Rukh Khan, and there he readily agreed because he was giving a guest appearance. But when he was offered this full-fledged role, despite the fact that it was by Shyam Benegal, and Shah Rukh Khan had earlier worked with Ketan Mehta and all these alternative directors, but he refused, or Kundan Shah to a certain extent, but he refused Shyam Benegal on the ground that he thought that Karishma's role was much more important and he would be completely overshadowed in her presence. So that kind of bias, and I thought latent sexism was there behind the making of Zubeda, which I thought is not something very positive, because if you look at somebody wanting to work with Benegal, Shah Rukh should not have thought twice. But again, these people are more concerned about their stardom and about their patriarchal prerogatives and their image than about good cinema at times, and that's most unfortunate. And that was one of my, like, I am quite fond of Shah Rukh Khan, but I was not happy when I read about this. This is what I can say.
I'm now very curious to know if Shah Rukh Khan ever regretted that decision.
Yes, maybe in some interview.
Refusing to act in Shyam Benegal's. Before we take up questions from the audience, and if Kinara has some questions for you, one final question. What is, in your opinion, the lasting legacy of Shyam Benegal's films in the Indian film industry? how do you think they have influenced subsequent generations of filmmakers?
Yes, I think Benegal is such a pioneering and such a original filmmaker. If you look at any aspect of his films, we find that it is impossible to ignore his legacy and create a meaningful cinema. Uh, the first thing that he was working on was on parallel or maybe art house films. And if we look at Benegal's own favorite cinematographer, Govind Nihalini, he was so majorly inspired by Benegal, and he made films like Tamas or Ardha Satya, which were iconic in their own way. And they were very much inspired from the kind of films that Benegal was making at that time. Then we, of course, have the likes of Ketan Mehta when he made Mirch Masala, or even the biopic Sardar, and films like Holi, which I think were predicated upon the kind of opera that Benegal was exploring at the same time. And then we have Vinay Shukla's biopic Godmother, which had Shabana Azmi incidentally, which was also like very much like if you look at Sardari Begum or Zubeda, the mode of representing the woman as the central protagonist of a biographical film is inspired from Benegal. And films by Prakash Jha, say if we think of Damul, or later when he makes films like Mrityu Dand, and then of course he goes on to make films like Gangajal, Jai Gangajal. All these films do have a very prominent presence of Benegal's influence, and even Kundan Shah or Kalpana Lajmi to a certain extent, but then less of maybe Shai Paranjape or Amol Palekar, because they were more or less making small domestic films on relationships, which was not perhaps what Benegal wanted to do much. So maybe not on those kind of films, but then again, if we look at later, I think as I did mention that Guarika Swadesh had this influence of Benegal, and because Benegal after Zubeda and Welcome to Sajjanpur, he was exploring this kind of hybrid cinema, which was neither very niche or nor very commercial, so somewhere in between. And if you look at films made later by even Sujit Sarkar or say I would say Shujoy Ghosh or Nandita Das, they were again trying to make these kind of films, which were not very remote and very dark and therefore alternative, or they were not making films which were mainstream and normative and typically commercial. So striving this middle ground, which Benegal taught us or taught them with Zubeda, with films like Zubeda, which had this song and dance and this colorful thing about them. And even Bose the Forgotten Hero has a very beautiful soundtrack by A.R. Rahman, but at the same time they had a serious content, and they were meaningful in their own ways, and they were not typical or normative. So I think all of these new age directors, like if we have Nitish Tiwari or even Vikramaditya Motwani, or the female ones like Gauri Shinde, they were all influenced by Benegal's vision of making cinema, which was wholesome at the same time, and it was serious and thought-provoking. And I don't think that before Benegal any parallel filmmaker had actually tried to change this idiom, except that if we in Bengal we do have Rituparna Ghosh, who tried to balance the commercial and the parallel. But in the parlance of Hindi cinema, Benegal will definitely always be somebody who would echo in the works of these younger people who were trying to make a meaningful and entertaining cinema at the same time.
Sneha, I think you very beautifully summarize all of this in the last paragraph of your introduction. And if you allow me, I'd like to share this para with our audience. You write, Benegal has continued to critique Indian socio-political, economic, and cultural realities at the intersection of tradition and modernity. and has produced a consistently good and substantial body of work to challenge the cliches and stereotypes of mainstream commercial Hindi cinema. Benegal himself has firmly asserted that, within quotes, one has to find a way to be seen and heard with the kind of film one makes, close quotes. This book is a critical tribute to his kind of cinema, one that has established his uniqueness as a director, visionary, thinker. It's a marvelous addition to the knowledge that is already available through the few books that we have on Benegal. And I'm sure this book is going to be extremely important for film scholars, people, film watchers, people in love with the Benegal films. So this is a great addition, Sneha. And I see Kinara has joined us, and I'm sure Kinara will now like to open this discussion up for question and answers. Kinara?
Oh, I didn't mean to stop your discussion. I just thought that if you really want to add something, Sneha, to what Chandana concluded, you're welcome to do it now.
Oh, there are no questions.
No, there are questions.
Okay,
there are questions, and we will
I think
answer.
I would like to answer the questions,
Okay.
but still, maybe I just wanted to say that this book also has chapters on Junoon and Suraj Ka Satwa Ghora. These are more complicated films in the sense that they are not so well known like the Village trilogy or even Zardari Begum Zubeda or films on Mahatma and Bose. So we have also tried to include discussions of lesser known films and more complicated narratives that Benegal explored. And maybe due to this want of a little bit of time that we did not discuss them very broadly, but I would request the readers to read these chapters. And
definitely, if you discuss everything, nobody would read the book. Please, I think it's good that you left some teasers behind. But I think this covered quite a lot of ground. I must compliment both of you. There are comments as well as questions, so I'll go in that order, as they have appeared in the chat. Ravi Kashinathani says this is a fun coincidence. Just yesterday, I watched an episode of Yatra and one of Amaravati Kathalu, which is Shankaramanchi's Telugu short stories. And today I got this invite for HLF. Thank you. So, and then adding to what Chandana talked about, Shyam Benegal's connect with Hyderabad and the number of films that are screened here. Sangamitra Malik adds that Moving Images has screened many films over the years, past so many years, but as recently as in May, there was a short retro with filming Bhumika and Sardari Begum in May. That is one thing. And Ravi asked the question, what would be the 4 to 5 elements and adjectives you would use to describe the Shyam Benegal universe?
Okay, so these are like, he's asking for keywords.
Yeah.
Like, I would say it would be adaptation, which is a very important thing that he does all the time, whether he adapts from biographies or from books or anything that he does. Then the axis of gender and caste, which are very important because he's always critiquing gender and caste. And then maybe these films, as I used the words pioneering and path breaking, because they were always trying to do something which were original and have not been done before. Say there have been films on villages in mainstream commercial cinema, Those Boy, Baby Bimal Roy, or those in early Hindi cinema, but nothing like Ankur, Nisant or Manthan came up before in Hindi cinema at least, but maybe he was inspired from Satyajit Roy's films or films by Ritik Ghatak and Mrinal Sen. So those two words will definitely come. And maybe also, as I say, somebody who is prolific at the same time, because he's into so many kind of things and he's at ease in all kinds of medium, whether he's making these documentaries which are so well researched, or he's making these films which are immensely well analyzed and extensively thought of, and therefore somebody who is a one of a kind person, in that sense that there cannot be a second Sham Benegal so easily. There can be broken bits of Benegal in other filmmakers, but not one person having so much in him.
Yeah, and actually one of the other viewers answered in his for this question also. He said profound, assiduous.
Yes,
his adjectives. This is Kumar Ramesh.
Yes, that's.
Yeah. Then Ravi again asked the question, can you tell us something about his use of background music or choice of songs in Sham Benegal's films?
Okay. This is an pertinent question because I have discussed a bit of that, and so did Nikhila in her chapter. I think he was mostly banking on Vanraj Bhatia till the point he made Zubeda. Because if you look at the kind of music that Vanraj Bhatia has provided for most of his films, which were not very big on music, there were a few songs, like in Nishan, there were these ceremonies which had some of these religious chants and hymns, or Manthan had a theme song, and then in Suraj Ka Satwa Ghoda there were some of these very mellifluous, melodious, low-key songs. But more or less with Zubeda, he broke that ground. And as I said, that he enters the domain of these kind of hybrid films where music was very important, because he was not making a very grave and a dark kind of a film like the early Village trilogy, where it was not necessary to insert songs unless otherwise it's a part of the situation. But if you are making a film which is entertaining and a bit commercial at the same time, with stars like Rekha and Karishma Kapoor, and of course Zubeda was a very beautiful musical in the sense that the romance bit had to be articulated through the songs. And then after that, if we look at Bose the Forgotten Hero, despite the faction and a lot of things that happened between 1939 to 1945 in Bose's life, but the music again by A. Rahman is very significant and very well done and very well applied, even if it is in the form of background music. And then Shantanu Moitro in Welcome to Sajjanpur gives a very beautiful track because their songs were necessary to enliven this kind of a playful and colorful romantic comedy that he had come back to doing, because he had done Charandas Chor way back in before he started doing Ankur. So, and he comes back to this form with Welcome to Sajjanpur in 2008. So that way there has been quite an evolution of the music of Benegal's films, from the somber, serious types which did not require music much, and to the more colorful and hybridized forms of serious cinema, which needed good music.
Okay. Actually, for this question also, Kumar Ramesh gives his own comment. He says, Tumris and Sardari Begum, we never had such performances.
Sardari Begum, I'm thankful to you for reminding me of that. Yes, definitely. In Sardari Begum, music is the soul of that film. And yes, of course. That's a film which actually explores music. Right.
Yeah. And Kumar Ramesh again says, Junoon is one film I admire it even now, one of the best of Shashi Kapoor's performances. I think we all agree with that. Yes. Ambarish Upadhyay says, ma'am, do you find Benegal's influence or vision in any Indian contemporary filmmaker? I think you did
I have answered this question about it.
Yeah.
Last one. Yes.
Or maybe he joined late and you might have missed it. Yeah.
Yes. I think, yes, when we think of, as I was talking about this legacy, and I find that it is impossible to not to look at Benegal's films and make films like, say, if we think of Sujit Sarkar or Sujoy Ghosh, who make kind of films which are very realistic, but at the same time, they are quite entertaining at the same time. And even Ashutosh Gwarikar, especially when he's making Swadesh, he's definitely been very conscious of the way in which Benegal talks about village realities. And all the biopics that have been now made and following, as I said, Sardar or Godmother, they're very conscious about the way Benegal had made these biographical films at a point where none of the other filmmakers were actually trying to make any biographies. He explored this terrain. So the influence will be pervasive and relevant, and the legacy will continue.
Lakshmi Reddy says analysis is really given very well. Vijay Kumar, my colleague, asks, Trikal was quite an unusual Benegal film. Where would you fit it in Bangalore? Benegal, sorry.
Yes, Trikal is a kind of a film which is a multi-starrer. It is very complicated in terms of its plot. It is nearer to Kalyug in that sense that even Kalyug is talking about a family and how the business runs and how things change and everything. And Trikal is a cross-generational kind of a film about this problem with the Portuguese occupation of Goa, and how that kind of a legacy bears upon the culture of Goa. And actually, Trikal was based on one of his acquaintances, a family of Indian Portuguese who were actually with the Brahmins, because as he was talking in his interview, I'll go back to his interview in this, because there he does mention that the Portuguese did not convert the lower class people in Goa to Christianity, but they targeted the Brahmins. And so in Goa, we don't have Dalits becoming Christians, but we have the upper class Brahmins who took up Christianity and the mantle of carrying the culture of the colonized. And Trikal explores that aspect very well. And we do not have a separate chapter on Trikal, but the chapter on Kalyug and Junun, they have made very rich cross-references to Trikal. And of course, it's a very significant and a very difficult film, I would say, one of his lesser explored films, and not very easy to actually pin down upon. And maybe we did not have a separate chapter, but we have made ample cross-references to Trikal.
I think the last comment I would read out of Sangamitra Malik, and I hope this will be true of all the viewers here. Very tempted to purchase the book after this wonderful and detailed conversation, and I hope people do buy this. I think it's an important contribution to understanding the charismatic personality of Shyam Benegal. Chandana said she was in school when Benegal was making his movies, and I was in college. And some of Nishant's casting took place in Osmania University at that time. For us, Benegal was a very big hope. And, you really, both of you took us down a lot of, nostalgia, down memory lane, when we talked about new Indian cinema. We talked about alternative cinema being much more important. And finally, Indian cinema coming of age. That was the kind of atmosphere in which we viewed Benegal. And it was a lovely time. We had some of the best of Indian cinema coming out then. And we're very fortunate to have, like Chandana said, Benegal is from Hyderabad, our own Telugu Bidda. So we are very happy about it. And many of his themes have really promoted Dakhini, and that is, and the Telangana dialect. These two are less represented in Indian cinema. Even in Telugu cinema, they are not so much represented. So that was a very good thing. I'm really happy that we had a wonderful conversation, very easy. And I think I must compliment both of you for having such a lovely conversation. We didn't lose interest any point of time. It was, it covered every aspect of the book, even though I think some have been left behind. That's fine. We can't cover everything, but we got such a good flavor of the book and its contents. And I must thank both Chandana for very skillfully steering this conversation, and for you answering very patiently and lucidly for all the questions that Chandana put to you. It was a wonderful conversation. I must thank you both for giving us this wonderful discussion. My thanks are also due to Orient Black Swan. Orient Black Swan is an inseparable associate of the Hyderabad Literary Festival right from our first one. And we are going into our 14th edition in 2024 Jan. And without OBS, I think HLF would not be really, get the kind of support in terms of the printing of schedules, etc. And we're very happy to be associated with them and have some of these online sessions also. We try to have at least a couple in each year for the online sessions. And we are happy that this time we chose your book to be a part of the HLF online session. I thank all our viewers who have listened to it and also commented, and as well as given us the benefit of your questions. And I thank Chandana and Sneha for this wonderful conversation. Thank you very much. And please tune in for our next session, which will be coming in shortly in September.
Okay.
Please subscribe to our YouTube session by clicking on the icon and liking it, so that you will get intimations about our sessions every month. Thank you.
Thank you. And good night, I guess. I can leave.